So a few weeks ago, a bipartisan group of lawmakers laid out a framework for an infrastructure package for President Biden, Vice President Harris, and their administration. They support this package, by the way. We're almost there, but Vice President, as we heard from the Vice President yesterday, we need to get it across the finish line. As we advocate for county transportation priorities, we have an ally in our next speaker, especially with his background as a local government elected official. He's joined us now several times virtually. He's actually called me on my mobile phone to talk to me about our priorities. I was just blown away. I'm driving down the road one day, I see a 202 number coming in, and the secretary's calling me, wanting to know what we think at NACo. So in just a few months, we're pleased to welcome him with us again, this time in person. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome with me the 19th U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon. And let me begin, President Moore, by thanking you for your leadership and for the invitation to be here. I really appreciated the conversation we had in March, and I'm glad to be with you again. And I'm so glad that we can be together in person. I'm also thrilled to be sharing the afternoon with my colleague, Secretary Fudge. I always thought that if Washington worked a little more like local communities, we'd all be a lot better off. And so it's great to be with a former elected local official and with all of you. And I want to thank NACo for your partnership in helping to secure state and local support in the American Rescue Plan. It's easy and important to look ahead to the next hill as soon as we're done with the last thing, but let's not forget what a monumental achievement that was. And we know how critical it was to keeping transportation and other critical services needed running when they were needed most. Now, one thing I've noticed since I got to Washington is that people here say state and local like it was all one word, like state and local was the same thing. Have you noticed that? And also, certainly think of local as all the same thing, not always recognizing just how critical our counties are. And yet you have so many more highway miles and road miles under your responsibility than frankly, the mayors who usually get the first phone call about them. And we know that. You have public health responsibilities that very few people thought much about until everything depended on them. You have so many functions that the public does not understand and are less likely to get attention or recognition except when something goes wrong. That is the very nature of public service, and so I want to recognize it right now. So thank you for everything that you do. And in particular, at a moment like this, I want to thank you for the bipartisan or nonpartisan way in which you do so much of your work. It really matters. It feels good to be in front of hundreds of people it feels good to be in front of hundreds of people, period. Which again is a testament to the success of the President's vaccination campaign, but really the work that you all did on the front lines actually delivering these needed public health services. We know we're not there yet, but it has been a remarkable and life-saving effort by county leaders across the country. What I was about to say is it feels good to be in front of hundreds of people who are in a large nationwide body of elected officials from both parties who share ideas and priorities and, from what I can tell, actually like each other. That is a treat, and we could use a lot more of that here in Washington. And that brings me to the moment that's in front of us, because this is a bipartisan moment around a shared priority. A few weeks ago, the President and a bipartisan group of senators did what we have missed in Washington for a long time, which is work together and reached a historic agreement. A vision for $1.2 trillion of investment, the largest in our infrastructure in a century. And we were thrilled to see the supportive statements from NACo when the bipartisan infrastructure framework was announced, and we ask that each of you continue to add your voice in the community. Everyone in this room, everyone in the National Association of Counties is in a position of power, and even more important, a position of trust and credibility to help bring the bipartisan infrastructure framework across the finish line, and we're looking to you to do just that. So let me give you a little ammo on how to remind everybody just how important this is. First of all, it will fix our roads and bridges, ports and airports and waterways in a way that we have needed for far too long. It will be the largest investment in passenger rail since the creation of Amtrak itself, improving our current service and making it faster and more reliable and bringing it to more communities that have been left out in the past. It's about time that we did that. This will be the largest federal investment in public transit ever. And that means better and more extensive service, yes, in our biggest cities, but also in rural communities that depend on transit, that depend on paratransit in so many ways. It'll make our infrastructure more resilient, which we know is so important today and into the future. And it's going to allow us to work with you to build a national network of 500,000 electric vehicle chargers in rural and disadvantaged as well as urban communities. And I think this is so important because there are so many Americans who would benefit so much from the fuel savings that are available if we can move into that electric vehicle future. And make no mistake, it's coming either way. The question is if it'll be made in America. We're going to work together to make sure that actually happens. So, obviously, I'm focused on the transportation part, but this plan would also let us work with you to eliminate the nation's lead service lines and pipes and deliver clean drinking water to every single American so that you never have to worry about whether children are going to be poisoned by lead. And yes, we finally have the opportunity to bring fast, affordable, broadband internet to every single American in the United States of America. Let's do it. And when you add it all up together, you come to maybe the most important part, which is that these investments will create a generation of good-paying jobs, the majority of which are available to workers, whether they've got a college degree or not. A blue-collar blueprint for the economy of the future. And I know sometimes when we talk about these jobs, they sound so futuristic that it's hard to picture them. But let's be very clear. We're talking about jobs that exist right now, just having more of them. The kinds of workers who will lay new train lines and strengthen our power grids and insulate our buildings and build the vehicles of the future right here in America. And there's one more thing out of my mayoral heart that I want to raise that is very important. I know you've been outspoken and importantly so on this. State and local funding from the American Rescue Plan will not be clawed back as a pay-for the bipartisan infrastructure framework. Let me make it tangible in terms of one way that this package could be helpful to so many communities. You know, when I was mayor of South Bend, I was always keeping an eye on our population because we were a city that had a reputation before for losing our youth. And I know this happens across so many counties, and these population statistics are something that NACo tracks and publishes on your website. And for so many years, America's cities and counties watch their young people grow up and then move away. We have a chance right now to reverse that trend. We've seen a fundamental shift in work patterns this year, and now we stand on the brink of an infrastructure vision that will create millions of good jobs, giving counties and small communities an opportunity to attract young workers and families back home. But that can't happen on its own. Picture what it takes to actually make that possible, right? First of all, broadband, so that someone can work for, let's say, Google from any one of your counties, or better yet, start the next one from any one of your counties and create the jobs that would come with that. You got to have the good-paying jobs in building and construction trades, including for those without a college degree. You got to have main streets designed for people to be safe as they traverse them. Yes, in a vehicle, in a car, or in a truck, but also if they're on a motorcycle, or if they're on 2 feet, or if they're in a wheelchair, or a bike, or a baby stroller. We've got to make sure we have safe streets for all. And these are the kinds of things we can do with this infrastructure framework. So I know I'm preaching to the choir a little bit, but I can't help myself because I'm so thankful for your support. And while this deal is historic, we're not there yet. We've got some work to do. It is amazing how challenging it sometimes is to get Congress to agree to something that overwhelming bipartisan majorities of Americans and some local officials already overwhelmingly want. So I think it's important to connect this up to an even bigger picture. When we look at the infrastructure frameworks that framed and defined our country, the Transcontinental Railroad, the New Deal, the interstate highway system, things we rely on in every part of this country, you can see a couple of things that become clear in that picture. One, those investments weren't just the foundations of job growth and economic success, they actually helped unite America because they literally connected us. Here's what Eisenhower said about it, quote, "Our unity as a nation is sustained by free communication of thought and by easy transportation of people and goods. Together, the united forces of our communication and transportation systems are dynamic elements in the very name we bear, United States. Without them," he said, "we would be a mere alliance of many separate parts." And there's actually a very similar statement by George Washington talking about the need for a canal, a piece of infrastructure we don't talk about so much these days, that was so important to making America, America. Infrastructure connects us, and in a divided time, that matters more than ever. Now, the second thing I want to mention is that each of those big infrastructure investments we made was ferociously debated at the time. And nobody got everything they wanted. But they ultimately happened with bipartisan support, and the rest was history. Our history of economic strength and connectedness that we now have an opportunity to keep alive for the next generation of Americans. So, if you believe that the bipartisan infrastructure plan will help the country, if you believe that the bipartisan infrastructure framework will help your county, this is the time to make your voices heard. And let me mention one other thing, because if all goes well, then there's going to be the small matter of delivery. And I want you to know you have my commitment that the U.S. Department of Transportation will work with you to be as user-friendly as a federal agency has ever been, because you shouldn't need a full-time staff of federal relations professionals to figure out how to get support from an agency here in Washington, D.C. We're going to work with you on that. Let me leave you with a thought of one more thing that's at stake that I think is even bigger than all the things we just talked about. It sounds lofty, but I really think it's at stake in our transportation vision. And it's the question of democracy. The world, and by the way, I recognize that so many of you, another underappreciated county function, are the stewards of our very democracy. And that's an incredibly important job. But frankly, this is one of those moments that have come along from time to time in the history of our world where the world watches to see who can do better and is testing us to see whether democracies can still best deliver the big, ambitious things that cause people to thrive, or whether some other system, some command and control system, where a single leader can make decisions alone and where every other authority figure from the equivalent of a governor to a mayor to a county commissioner is just there to carry out orders. The idea that maybe that's the way to do it, because it's more efficient, it's less noisy, there's no public meetings. But that kind of democracy can deliver best in the view of the president, in my view, I trust in your view, and in the view of the American people. So now is our chance to go out and prove it. To prove that American democracy can show not only that it still functions, but that it is the best way to deliver for the American people and lay the foundation of prosperity for generations of today and tomorrow. That's what's at stake. That's what we are delivering together, and that's why I'm so thankful for your voices, your support, and your leadership. Thank you for the chance to be with you. Let's go out and get this done. Take care.